same God that spread the heavens wide, the same God that was crucified is calling us all by name. Yes, you are calling us all by name. 'Cause you're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. Yes, you're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. Yes, you're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. Yes, he's calling, he's calling us to the cross. The same love that set the captives free, the same love that opened eyes to see is calling us all by name. Yes, you are calling us all by name. The same God that spread the heavens wide, the same God that was crucified is calling us all by name. You are calling us all by name. 'Cause you're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross. You're calling, you're calling, you're calling us to the cross.
So tonight I'm going to talk about Jesus in the storm. So obviously the passage where he calms the storm from Luke chapter 8, if you want to read with me. And I'm going to read verses 22 to 25. And it says, "Now it came to pass on a certain day that he went into a ship with his disciples, and he said unto them, Let us go over unto the other side of the lake. And they launched forth. But as they sailed, he fell asleep, and there came down a storm of wind on the lake, and they were filled with water, and were in jeopardy. And they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water. And they ceased, and there was a calm. And he said unto them, Where is your faith? And they, being afraid, wondered, saying to one another, What manner of man is this? For he commandeth even the winds and the water, and they obey him." And that is where I'm going to take my reading from this evening. So I first want to just point out some context for this passage before I get into my thoughts on it. So before this, obviously the disciples had been with Jesus. They were with Jesus at this time. And they'd seen him performing miracles in the chapters before this, and even raising the dead back to life. Surely we're thinking at this stage that the disciples trust him. You know, if you've seen a man who claims that he's God perform these miracles, then you know he's God. I also want to point out that 4 of the 12 disciples, I believe, were fishers, or fishermen. 2 of them at least by trade. But the storm still seems to have panicked them. They were amongst the 12 that were panicked by this storm. And they even said that they were going to perish. They thought that they would die from this storm. So maybe it is that they didn't realize that Jesus could control something that they saw as so dangerous. You know, we look at it and see it as foolish, but these men were fishermen. They had spent considerable time on the waters, and they knew how dangerous it was. So I want to point out from the passage then some key points that I think are worth noting. First of all, Jesus was on the boat in the storm with them. He wasn't sitting on the sidelines. He wasn't distant on the shore waiting for them to get to them. He didn't walk across the water as he could have and wait for them to weather this storm and meet him on the other side. He was on the ship. He was experiencing exactly what they were experiencing. The only difference is he had peace. Maybe they should have noticed when they went into Jesus that he was sleeping, and thus he was peaceful. And him being God, he knew what the outcome was, so maybe there was nothing to worry about. But obviously that's not the case. Jesus was in the storm with them. Secondly, from that then, he knew that they would survive this, right? He was sleeping on the ship. He wasn't worried because he knew the outcome. So he knew that they would survive. He could have let the storm continue because he knew they were going to survive it. But maybe the difference is that there was a lesson to be taught by showing his power in this situation, right? They'd seen him show power over sickness and over death itself, but maybe this was just a further expression of his power. And that's sort of similar, I think, in our storms in life that we might go through. Sometimes there's more glory given to God if we go through the storm, and maybe it doesn't get calmed, but he brings us to the other side. And sometimes as well, there's a miracle that happens and it ceases, and he's given glory that way as well. We don't know which gives him more glory, only he knows that, but we have to trust him in that. The third point is that these men were with Jesus and they were still freaking out. Maybe they didn't have that complete faith that we would expect from the disciples. We, I think, maybe can be a bit harsh on ourselves, or maybe on other believers as well, whenever storms hit our lives and we freak out a bit initially. But we have to realise these men had literally seen Jesus with their eyes and were still freaking out in this storm. So maybe we need to be a bit more forgiving on ourselves. I want to point out as well, not everything that they did was wrong, right? Yes, they freaked out, but the positive to take is that they went to the Master, right? They had their moment of freaking out, thinking they're going to die here, and then they go and wake Jesus up. They knew him well enough. They had seen him perform these miracles, and while they hadn't seen him perform this specific miracle of calming the storm, they knew that if anyone could do it, Jesus could. We need to remember his faithfulness through everything else. We need to remember what he's done before. They'd seen him in action countless times, but how often do we forget what God has done in our lives already? Or what he's done for other believers that we've seen? We're very quick to forget how faithful he's been. Don't let the enemy use that and abuse it to cause doubt and confusion in our minds. We need to remind ourselves of how faithful he's been. So, already coming to a close, I promised it would be short. But I just want to say, whatever storm we're facing as individuals or as a church, we need to remember that God is in the storm with us. He's on the boat. He's a very, very active God that doesn't sit on the sidelines. Maybe if God seems a bit silent to us, we should still have peace because he still has it in control. And don't forget the things that he's done so easily, because he's willing and able to do it again. And that's what I want to leave you with this evening.
You know, when you're preparing your heart to speak, and just sharing with Peter a few wee thoughts I'll share on Sunday evening, and then James got up and used my text, or one of my texts, but it's confirmation from God. Church, I'm absolutely heartbroken to have to tell you that Big Arthur White passed away today. Chalky. Speaking to Audrey, I don't know the circumstances. The police were still in the apartment, and a neighbour's looking after Iris. Just one of the kindest men I've ever met in my life. And I am emotional. I'm not going to apologise. Really sad to hear that today. So we'll remember him and Iris, Audrey. I don't know Arthur's family. I know he has a son and a daughter, Barbara. I don't know if there's any other siblings. I don't think there was. But anyhow, we remember the families tonight. And as you'll see, let's remember Ruth Patton's family, the Thompson family. Ruth's nephew, his wife, died today with COVID. And so I assured Ruth of our prayers. So let's remember tonight all those with cancer. Some of our folks are really ill with cancer at this moment, and they really need God's touch. And we just think of Hilary Diddy, Hilda Morrison and Peggy Donaldson, that God would just be near them, and all those that we're continuing to pray for. Don't have an update on Lydia, Gareth's aunt, but I know that she isn't doing well either, so let's remember this. All those with COVID, it's good to see Karen out tonight, and a lot of people are, although they're getting the negative test, they're still not feeling well, and this thing seems to take a while to get over it. But we will add to the prayer list is Sonia Morrow and Paul. Paul isn't feeling the best, so we remember Paul tonight. All the needs that we normally pray for. Let's pray for Pastor Alan Patton. He has pneumonia, both lungs. Peter and I were talking to all the ministers on Thursday, and he did look knackered like he did. And we're just remembering Alan tonight. So let's pray. Let's come to the throne of grace. Let's remember the weekend services. We're looking forward to the baptismal service on Sunday morning, and we just pray for, I know, speaking to Nicholas, he's invited a lot of our family, so we just pray that they'll come along, and it'll just be a great time in the house of the Lord. Pray for our sisters on Saturday morning as they have their service, their ladies' breakfast. So let's come before God's throne, and let's just seek His face and pray God's blessing.